So I think one final concept we should touch on before we run out of time is so when you have this recognition of the kind of emptiness of essence of everything in the world, and you lose the sense of there being this essence of self inside yourself, you're left with this picture of the world that you might call oneness or interdependent co-arising as a kind of related concept. Where are you currently at with your thoughts on this concept of oneness, or whatever label you'd like to give it?
Well, first of all, there's this argument you can get into about the language. I mean, if you say, I am one with, I mean, first of all, it's a feeling, the feeling I described earlier where I felt like, the bird singing was as much a part of me as my foot tingling. That was a movement toward the kind of experience I think you're describing. And first of all, I'd say, if you say, I felt like I was at one with the universe, there are strict Buddhists who will say, wait, you shouldn't put it like that because there's no I, the self doesn't exist. Whereas some Hindus would say that's a perfectly acceptable way to put it, that Atman, self, merged with Brahman, kind of the universal soul or something, perfectly valid way to speak. My own view is that the experiences being described in those two traditions, Buddhism and Hinduism, are probably basically the same experience. And the question of nomenclature, we shouldn't get hung up on. I think the question is whether you can defend the experience, as I guess the philosophical term would be like ontologically, like, is that a valid description of reality? In other words, the things that normally I think of as separating myself from the world are in a way illusions. And then the second dimension of evaluation is a moral one. And I take on both of those in the book. And the moral one is, in other words, the moral takeaway would just be, well, if I am one with everything, then I'm not really more important. Although we all tend to live our lives as if we are more important than other people. We are preoccupied with our own welfare and so on. That the moral take home of actually feeling at one with everything would be that actually, no, it's all equally important. And that, I think, is a very, very defensible, that this is closer to the moral truth. Whether it's, closer to the kind of ontological truth, I think you can argue. And I certainly argue in the book that the opposite intuition, that the ordinary experience of this great separation between me and everything else, is not obviously defensible when you look at it carefully, ontologically. But I certainly believe that the moral take home is especially defensible. The moral take home of, again, whether you want to call it an experience of oneness or an experience of not self, either way, it's an experience of continuity between what we ordinarily think of as our interior and the rest of the world. The walls, have kind of broken down. And, it's one reason I encourage people to go on retreat. If you can have anything like an approximation of that experience.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't go into a retreat expecting that, or I didn't get one on that experience, particularly on my first retreat, but it's more likely to happen there than it is, while driving to work. Happily,
Yeah.
because if it happened while you're driving to work, that could cause problems in it.
Yeah, that's a good warning.